Our next guest on Frogs Today needs no introduction. The most popular horned frog, I'm going to go ahead and say, of all time. Ladies and gentlemen, if you would, please welcome the Pro Football Hall of Famer, LaDainian Tomlinson. LT, how are you?
I'm great, Brian. It's been a while since we've gotten a chance to talk, so I'm glad to be able to sit down with you in this brand new studio.
Well, I'm honored that you would be here because we wanted to christen it with you. We thought, you know what, we'll start at the top with it. I want to spend a lot of time talking about you. And I know that sometimes you and I've talked in the past, you'd rather talk about other stuff.
Yeah.
But there's a couple of things that I want to make sure that folks who are maybe being introduced to LaDainian for the first time know. Let's go way back first. We'll rewind things. You're growing up outside of Waco. You're 7 years old, and your dad left.
Mm-hmm.
How has that driven you to be the husband and the father and the man that you are today?
Yeah, I think you take your experiences growing up, good or bad, and ultimately you apply them to your life, and your family and situations and experiences that you may go through. And I think, the bad stuff, obviously, the bad experiences, obviously, some of them I had no control of, including, my father leaving and my parents getting divorced. That happens in over 50% of marriages in this country. But I think the other thing is, you learn from those experiences how you're going to do certain things better when you're in that position, And so the other thing, I think, you understand the responsibility to the folks around you, your family, right, as you get older. And I certainly understood as my father left, and then ultimately my father passed, after my 6th year in the National Football League, I became the patriarch of my family, at that age. And so it wasn't without mistakes in dealing with family and friends. But at the same time, I think you just do the best you can, and knowing that all those experiences in the past has really shaped who LaDainian is today.
Before you became the patriarch, there was a really strong matriarch. And she has been. I mean, your mother is pretty special.
She's a special woman.
Yeah.
And, it's funny because now I'm able to reflect, now that I have kids, I'm able to reflect on certain things that she did consistently with me and my siblings that really had a profound impact on the way I would live my life growing up. For example, my mom used to, at the breakfast table, she would read the paper and find all these news articles and stories of kids our age doing certain things, whether it was, hey, this kid got in trouble for selling drugs, or, this kid was in a gang and end up, getting killed, for God forsake, or, this kid here got a scholarship and he's gonna read this story.
Right.
She did a great job of putting that in front of my face, and really, I think what that does is makes you understand that you are not invincible. Like, these are things that are happening to kids your age. So at the end of the day, you're gonna have choices that you're gonna have to make outside of this house that can have profound consequences on your future. And so knowing all those things, and she catered to the fact that she knew what my goals and dreams were.
Right.
I told her as 7 years old, early on, what I wanted to do. So she held me to those standards and kept me accountable to what I told her I wanted to do.
Did she preach?
She did.
She did?
Yes.
And I don't mean just to, I'm not talking about preaching to you at home like my mama did to me.
Right.
But,
No.
but I mean, but she actually would get in the pulpit, right?
Yes, she would, to the entire congregation.
Yeah.
And I think those were, to see her in that light, to see her leading so many people, I think it honestly gave me confidence of, and this is who my mother is.
Right.
She's a leader. So what's expected of me? How can I go outside of this house and represent her and not be a leader, be a follower, succumb to peer pressure and all these different things that happens to a lot of adolescents, kids.
Yeah.
And so that part, now I'll tell you, Brian, it wasn't always that way. Early on, my mom wasn't the same. She hung out and she had friends. They would come over to the house and hang out, play cards, and church wasn't involved until when I turned 13 years old, something changed in her. and she became full on, into being a Christian
Mhm.
and obviously being a pastor.
Mhm.
And that's when it was at the right time in my life
Yeah,
that she
13's
did that.
yeah, that's a pretty formative part of your growing up as a man.
Absolutely.
You talked about mistakes along the way. When you're growing up, you're coming out of high school. You're in high school, coming out of high school, and then deciding where you're going to go to college. Who were you leaning on? I mean, who was giving you the advice to stay the right path, to choose to go to college? Did you have people in your life that you could count on,
Well, I did.
other than your mom?
Yeah, well, I did. I had some excellent high school coaches.
Yeah.
Coach Leroy Coleman, who's recently passed
Right.
away, was my high school coach, and he, along with a number of other, Walter Brown, my running backs coach, really, kind of imparted in me the importance of going to that next level
Mhm.
and not being afraid to get out, and attack college. Because listen, sometimes kids are afraid of failure. Like, if I get outside of my comfort zone, if I leave Waco, then I don't think I'm gonna be successful. This is all I know. And those men did a great job of instilling in me, like, no, you have what it takes.
Mm.
You should go off and do great things. And it was really because of Walter Brown, my running backs coach, that I think I took an interest in preparing for college so young, in the 10th grade. That's when I started to prepare for college and really think about going to the next level. And it was because of that man.
Where would you have gone if it wouldn't have been TCU?
So it was going to be maybe Baylor
Mhm.
or North Texas
Mhm.
or maybe UTEP.
Okay.
Now, Texas A&M, in all honesty, Texas A&M was recruiting me,
Right.
and it was between me and a running back.
Uh huh.
So I guess we have to thank Texas A&M in a way, because if they would have offered me,
Yeah.
I don't know if I'll be at TCU.
All right. Let's ask this, and we don't have to. I don't want you to name his name. How many years did that guy play in the NFL?
I don't think he did.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, 11 years in the NFL for LaDainian Tomlinson, Hall of Fame member, obviously. Multiple Pro Bowls. I mean, we could talk about all the accolades and the numbers that people remember. The 406, though, will always stand out to me against UTEP. And for folks who don't know, that was a record at the time, single game record. You come to TCU, Dennis Franchione comes over as coach, takes over after a 1-win season, and you're playing UTEP, and LaDainian touches it, and he touches it, and he touches it for 406. At the time, did you know how big of a deal that was?
I did not. I did not. In fact, I just remember at halftime, I only had a little over 100 yards. Like, you think 400 yards, Jesus, you must have 250 at halftime.
Sure.
No, I think I had less than 150
Yeah.
at halftime. And I remember just before halftime, I fumbled the ball. And, Coach Franchione got on my butt in the locker room. Hold on to the ball. You blowing the game. And I went back out, because the last thing he said, we're going to keep giving it to you. Hold on to it. So I went back out with the mindset that I was going to take control of this game, because I knew that our offensive line was dominating their
Right.
defensive line, and they had two pros
They
on
did.
that defensive line
I
at the
know.
time.
Yeah.
One of them, Brian Young, who
Yep.
played a long time in the National Football League, and we still joke about that game
Right.
to this day. But going back to that game, coming out halftime, I just remember thinking, I have to make up for the fumble that I had going into halftime. And Brian, it's the fourth quarter, and the game is almost pretty much in hand. And I'm thinking, all right, it's
Did my
over.
job.
Did my job.
Yeah.
I run off the field, get to the sideline, and Fran said, you're only like 8 yards from setting an all-time record in one game. And so I went back out there, and I think at the time it was like 386 maybe, or
Right.
390 something.
Yep.
And so I got it, and I started to run off the field. And Fran said, you're about to get 400 yards. No one has ever done that.
Yeah.
Get back in there.
Yeah.
And so he gave me one more carry to get me over 400 yards into 406.
Has anybody? I'm sure people have asked this. How sore were you the next day?
You know what?
Heck, you
So,
were barely
yeah,
touched.
yeah,
But
the funny thing was, I felt like after the game, like I can keep going. I think it was the adrenaline of all the national attention. If you remember,
oh yeah,
I mean, it was so much national attention on after that game. And so I remember going home, and a lot of the guys, in college, you think, man, let's go out and celebrate.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, we'll go out. And I sat on the couch for a second, and it was over.
Yeah.
I
Shut it down.
didn't go out that
Yeah.
night, just to say the least.
That's when you, that was really the coming out. You became the man
Yeah.
at that point. Prior to that at TCU, a couple of years prior, you were splitting time with Basil Mitchell.
Mhm.
And I like to joke that the only guy that kept LaDainian Tomlinson from starting at tailback was Basil Mitchell.
Yeah.
Well, you could say it was Dennis Franchione too. We joked about that with him,
Yeah.
that he was the only guy. But you and Basil had a really cool relationship.
Yeah.
Is that still does this still exist?
Yeah, we still have a really good relationship, really good friends. And I credit Basil for really motivating me to come to TCU
Mhm.
because on my recruiting visit, at the they usually bring in the veteran guys to have breakfast, with the recruits.
Yeah.
And so we're sitting there, some of the recruits, running backs. Here come Basil Mitchell. He sit down with us and eating, and he's like, "So where else you guys interested in coming?" And so we're talking, a little small talk, and the last thing he says, "Well, you guys shouldn't come here because you're gonna sit the bench if you come here." And I took it as a challenge. I
Right.
said, okay. And I ended up coming, obviously, and we had a little friendly rivalry, a competition of pushing each other.
Yeah.
And that's what it was. It was really all about. But I do remember. So I don't know if you remember my sophomore year when Franchione first came in, and it
Mhm.
was open competition.
Yep.
And Basil and I was
Oh, you
was
back and
battling
forth.
out,
Yeah.
right? So I ended up winning the job,
Right.
but fullbacks weren't playing well at
Yep.
the time.
They had to make a move.
And Franchione called us in the office, and he said, I need my two best running backs on the field. LT, you're big enough that you can play fullback, but I make a deal with you. You're going to still play running back. Single back situations, you will still be the back. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
So about 3 games in, it wasn't going like that.
Right. You were just fullback
yeah,
at that point.
yeah. Basil was, having an outstanding year so
Yeah.
far. And I went in to talk to Fran, and people probably don't know this. And I was about to transfer
Mhm.
at that point because I knew in my heart I wasn't a fullback, and I felt like high school was repeating itself.
Right.
If you remember,
Yeah, you didn't. Yep.
I played fullback in high school, sophomore and junior year, didn't get the opportunity until my senior year, and then now I'm at TCU in my sophomore year, I'm playing fullback
Right.
again. And so I saw that in my mind as I can't do this again. I have to prove that I'm a running back. And when I went in and talked to Fran, I said, Fran, I've done what I can to help this team. I said, but I'm not a fullback, coach.
Yeah.
I said, I'm going to transfer. He said, no, we're moving you back to running back today.
We were just going to do that tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it worked out since. LaDainian Tomlinson with us. The you think about you mentioned thinking about transferring, and the state of the college game today.
Yeah.
Because of the transfer portal, because of the name, image, and likeness deals. I know you as a fan of college football.
Mm-hmm.
Are you worried about it?
I am worried about it because what we have created is free agency in college football. I mean, we have always had, we know that scholarships are 1-year contracts,
Mhm.
and the kids have the opportunity to renew or not, but I think where we are now, the market is so competitive between these universities, especially with, the NIL deals,
Yep.
transfer portal and all these things. I'm afraid we may get to a point where it's just the wild, wild west, truly. Like, you cannot control if a kid is going to leave or not, no matter what he's been offered.
Right.
If there's a better situation, then he's out.
Yeah.
He's out of there. And honestly, at the end of the day, what does that teach our kids?
Yeah.
To quit or to just run off on someone because there's a better situation. You think the grass is much greener
Mhm.
on the other side. I think that's sending the wrong message, I should say.
Mhm.
But until the NCAA does something about it, Brian, and kind of gets a grip on it, we're going to have this free agency in college football.
Yeah. You weren't paid in college. You got a scholarship.
Right.
There's value in that scholarship, is there not? I mean, you got a degree from TCU.
Yeah.
Do we devalue that when we say, oh, we've got to pay him to come to TCU?
Well, it shouldn't be devalued. It absolutely should not be. But at the same time, it's like the competitive market that NCAA has created.
Mhm.
I mean, because think about it, it's no longer enough to just have the scholarship, Brian. If we're on the same team, we both have that scholarship, but you're driving a Benz,
Yeah.
and I'm in a Honda,
Yeah.
but we play the same,
Right.
we're both all conference, then that doesn't equal out.
Yeah.
And so now you start having the competition and the
Mhm.
side
Yeah.
eyes in the locker room, which you absolutely do not want.
No, I've heard stories, and I'm not going to tell you from who. I've heard stories where schools are, a starting unit is getting paid, getting an NIL deal,
Mhm.
and the backups are going full speed in practice. And I'm not going to say they're intentionally trying to hurt them, but they're trying to move those guys out. So then all of a sudden they're the starter and they get paid. When you start to create issues like that,
That's a problem.
that's a major
That's
problem.
a major problem. So what's going to happen is you're going to have to end up giving everybody something,
Yeah.
even if it's not equal. And we know it's impossible
Yeah, you can't.
for it to be equal, but you have to give those young men and women that's underneath those starters, you have to give them something.
Yeah.
And those are the things that I don't think we've fully wrapped our head around, in terms of the college game yet. NCAA, they really, don't understand how to wrap their minds around that part of it. But I will say it's the old saying of you can't please everybody.
No.
So at the same time, we're going to simply lose some people.
Yeah.
Because that's just the way it is.
Yeah. You and I were talking off air about the fact that, TCU's in a position where, they have a lot to sell. Got a lot of good things going on at TCU. Now, they may not be in a position that some schools are as far as the NIL is concerned. And you pointed out that, hey, maybe TCU just has to say, here's who we are, and here's what you get from TCU, and you rest on those principles and say, hey, here's what we're all about. I mean,
Yeah.
Can that be done?
I think so. I think there's a lot of really good people around Fort Worth.
Yeah.
Good business people that can create this certain type of resources and great experiences for our student athletes to make them feel like, oh man, I'm connected to this community. I'm connected with this brand. Maybe I don't want to go nowhere and try to chase, more money. And at the end of the day, we will never be able to compete with some of the brands of Alabama and Ohio State. That's just what it is.
If they want to just throw money at it.
Exactly.
Right.
That part of it.
Right.
But I think we can offer certain experiences that will be attractive to kids to make them want to stay. And then at the end of the day, a brand that you have built, and I've had this conversation with my own nephew who plays on the team.
Yep.
A brand that you have built at this school for 3 years, people know you. Why would you leave
I know.
for 1 year and try to build it somewhere else?
Yep.
Those are things that kids have to decide.
Yeah.
But I think, at the end of the day, you have to have the right people advising you as well to make those decisions.
That's part one of our conversation with Hall of Famer LaDainian Tomlinson. Next week here on Frogs Today, when the Hall of Famer sits down with us, we'll talk about success and failures and how it's affected his family. That's part two next week. We invite you to be back with us for that edition of our conversation with LaDainian Tomlinson.